Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My name is Steve Perry. I'm the president of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm delighted to be with you this morning along with all the panelists that are here. As you know, today's program is to have a group of very experienced individuals, not only great football players, but great individuals, talk with you on a subject of importance, which is titled racial equality and how, in their cases, pro football and their lives after pro football was positively affected, or how they positively affected racial equality. In a moment, we're going to hear from all these distinguished gentlemen. I'm going to introduce them to you briefly, but I would like to start by thanking the Cleveland Browns organization for having this event. They're the sponsors, they're providing the transportation, providing the facilities, going to give you the tour and lunch afterwards. So for all that the Cleveland Browns organization has done, let's give them a big round of applause. And as I said, I'm from the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and there's several other individuals here from the Pro Football Hall of Fame today. We're glad to partner with the Cleveland Browns to put the teleconference section of this in place so that not only will these gentlemen have an opportunity to speak directly to the students in this room, but they will speak to students in about a dozen high schools across the country who are tying in by video conference. So let's give the Pro Football Hall of Fame a round of applause. All right, now while we're giving applause, I'd like the gentlemen who are on the panel here to have some idea of who's in the house. And I would name your school, and if you'd like to give a shout out to let our speakers know who's here, go right ahead. Is there anyone here from John F. Kennedy High School? Did you say something? I'm not sure I heard it. John F. Kennedy, are you here? All right. Is John Marshall here today? There you go. John Marshall's in the house. Thank you. Anybody here from James F. Rhodes High School? Okay. Thank you. How about John Adams? Great. And John Hay? No? All right. And Lincoln West. That's wonderful. Now, I didn't miss any school, did I? All right, let's hear from all of you one more time. Glad to have you here. Now, as I mentioned, we have about a dozen high schools that are tied in by video conference, and our technicians are trying right now to reestablish the audio. They can hear us, but I'm not sure we can hear them. So we might not be able to hear their shout-outs, but I still want to mention their names. We've got tied in by video conference technology Warrensville Heights High School in Warrensville Heights, Ohio. We have Lima Senior High School in Lima, Ohio. We have Lakeview High School in Columbus. That's not Columbus, Ohio. Maine, I guess it might be. Then we have Cincinnatus High School in Cincinnatus, New York. We have Roxborough Road Middle School in Syracuse, New York. We have Boardman Glenwood in Boardman, Ohio. Mountain Gap Elementary School in Huntsville, Alabama. R.T. Cream Family School in Camden, New Jersey. Newton D. Baker School of Arts, Cleveland, Ohio. Ada High School in Ada, Ohio. And the Columbus Afrocentric School in Columbus, Ohio, as well as the John V. Lindsay Wildcat Academy in the Bronx, New York. Let's give them a hand. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to briefly introduce our panelists, and then we're going to get right to some discussion and hear some of your questions that you may have. You all have a booklet that gives more detailed information about their biographies, their accomplishments in pro football, as well as their accomplishments after pro football. So I will be very brief in my remarks so that we can spend most of our time hearing from them and hearing your questions. But first I want to introduce the gentleman who's on the far end. That's Dr. Walter Beach. He was born in Michigan. He went to college in Central Michigan University, played defensive back in the NFL for 7 years, from 60 to 66. And of those 7 years, he played his last 5 years here in Cleveland with the Browns, from 62 to 66. That's all right. In fact, I know you know your Cleveland Browns history, and you know what happened in 1964, and that is the Cleveland Browns won a world championship. It's what we today call the Super Bowl. At that time, it was called the World Championship, and Dr. Walter Beach was a key player on that 1964 team. Let's give him a round of applause. And I'd also like to acknowledge not only Dr. Beach traveling from a far distance to be with us this morning, but his wife has joined us. And there she is in the red, Mrs. Beach. Next gentleman I want to introduce is seated near the middle. That's Dick Shafrath. Actually, it's the Honorable Dick Shafrath, because after his football career, he was elected to serve in the Ohio Senate. And maybe he'll talk about some of his days serving as a leader in Columbus, Ohio state government. He was born in Worcester, Ohio. He graduated from The Ohio State University, and he played offensive line in the NFL for 13 years, from 60 to 66. And he also was a key player on the 1964 Cleveland Browns World Championship team. Dick Shafrath. Next, a name that is very familiar to Clevelanders, and that's Reggie Rucker. Reggie was born in Washington, D.C. He attended Boston University. He played the position of wide receiver in the NFL for 12 years, from 70 to 81. And the final 6 years were played here in Cleveland, 75 to 85. Went on to be a sports broadcaster and a number of other endeavors. Say hello to Mr. Reggie Rucker. All of these gentlemen are legendary. This next gentleman sitting right to my left is also legendary. He grew up in Carlsbad, New Mexico, went to the University of Colorado. He played for the Cleveland Browns from 1959 to 1967, so that means he's also a World Championship Cleveland Brown. And after the Browns' career, he went on to various positions in the NFL world, including scouting, and he's done a tremendous amount to improve the opportunities for minorities in the National Football League. That would be Mr. John Wooten. Last but certainly not least on this distinguished panel is Mr. Sam Tidmore. Sam was born in Decatur, Illinois, but he grew up here in Cleveland. He was an all-star athlete as a young person, went on to The Ohio State University, and played here for the Browns for a few years until a knee injury brought his career to a short end. So he otherwise would have been on that 64 team, but I think it was in 62 or 63 that his knee was injured and he wasn't able to do it. Nevertheless, he has gone on as well to some legendary things beyond pro football, and I'm sure he'll talk about that. Please give a round of applause for Mr. Sam Tidmore. Now, I'm sure your teachers or instructors would have let you know what this program is all about. Why are you giving up your morning to be here at Cleveland Browns Stadium to hear from these gentlemen? What's in it for you, and what can you do to make this a very successful program? Well, as I mentioned at the outset, what these gentlemen want to talk to us about is how they have advanced the notion of racial equality in our society by what they did during their days of playing pro football and by what they did in their days after pro football. And the message for all of us is, what can we do? What can each of you do to continue making progress on that notion of racial equality in our American society? And so hopefully in today's discussion, you'll hear some things, and hopefully you will say some things in terms of the questions that you ask that will help all of your fellow students here at the stadium and those that are tied in by the teleconference. So at the end of today's program, you'll say, I learned something really useful, really valuable that I can apply in my life. That's why we're here. So what I'd like to do is ask each of our panelists, and I'm going to start with Dr. Walter Beach, to make a few comments on the subject, and after we've heard from everyone, then we want to come back and engage in a discussion and answer questions that you all may have. So with that, Dr. Beach.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Cleveland Browns and the Pro Football Hall of Fame for sponsoring this, and I was pleased to be invited because I think it's very important that we continue the legacy of those individuals in our society and culture which make positive contributions. And so when I was asked to participate to talk about racial equity, one of the things that I wanted to make certain is that we have what I call a functional and operational definition about what we're talking about, and we should all be in agreement with what we're talking about. And I make a critical distinction between racial harmony and racial justice. And there's a difference in when we're talking about race, and I make another distinction between race and racism. And racism is that aspect of our society which invalidates individuals based on a hierarchy of color. So that's one of the things that I want to make certain that when I'm speaking is that the things that are negative that come out of my discussion, if there are, is when I'm critical of racism. And racism is different from race. Race is an obvious understanding that we look at each other, so there's no way for us not to see race. And I am race conscious, but I'm not a racist. So I just want to say that, and we'll talk about specific situations later on in our discussion that I can further shed some light on.
Sam?
I'm Sam Tidmore. I graduated from John Adams High School, and I wanted to give a yell out to all the kids that came from John Adams this morning. I grew up on Quincy Avenue. I don't know if all of you know where that is, but it's the rough side of town. And I'm very, very fortunate to go to John Adams and come under the influence of a different situation, I should say, lifestyle that I've ever encountered. Quincy Avenue was all black. John Adams was mostly white, 6% black at that point in time. And I had some life-changing experiences where I was introduced to football because we were too poor to have uniforms. And I encountered a white man there by the name of John Spencer Farrell, former Marine, who introduced me to football and encouraged me to play. And I was embarrassed, didn't know how to put a uniform on, but he encouraged me and told me I could go to any university in the country if I could develop my skills on football. Quick story, I had 22 offers when I graduated from John Adams to go to college anywhere I wanted to. But the most important thing he told me, you have to have the grades also. And I became an honor student there and went on to Ohio State and experienced a great opportunity to play for Woody Hayes. And a lot of people didn't understand Woody Hayes, but he was one of the few people, along with Spencer Farrell, to really stand up for racial equality at Ohio State. And Dick Shafrath can tell you, he just didn't tolerate it. And we had a great time, and we broke many, many records. I was on the 61 championship team with Paul Warfield, Matt Snell, and Bob Ferguson. And I've just been blessed by football. I had many, many opportunities because I was able to overcome racial issues and deal with them head on. And I certainly encourage you to do the same.
I'm Dick Shafran. I have a problem shaking, so it isn't, it's normal, I guess, a lot of people that are a little older than you. I think I beat you about 50-some years. I grew up in the old school of a farm in Wayne County, and we lived like the Amish and go to school 8 grades. I thought, man, this is going to be great because I couldn't wait to get out of school. Unlike Sam, I was not the greatest student in the world. But in any event, I had a mom and dad that were really special, and they wanted me to be the first child in the Shafrath family to go to high school. And boy, my mom and dad told me about the colored people or black people, whatever you want to be. There's no difference to me. It's that we're all one. And this last year, I was coaching with the Sandusky Blue Streaks, and 80% of them were a different color than me. But I'm going to tell you, the Lord put me there for some reason. Christ didn't make us different for some reason. He made us all the same. It's the way I grew up with my mom and dad. Never seen a black person in Worcester as I grew up until the KKK came to town. I didn't know there was an issue. I don't have to go into that now. At Ohio State, it was the first time I'd seen a teammate that was a different color. That marriage, and I'd expand on that a little bit, maybe a little later, but the first guy was my teammate, and right beside me was Jim Parker. And Jim Parker's in the National Football League Hall of Fame today. And I loved playing with Jim, and I loved my other teammates. Sam, we always get along great. I hate holding this thing because I just almost need one of those young ladies out there to hold it for me. You know, I'm talking about the old school. Thanks, Reggie. I never had a date till I was in high school, girls. And my mom took me on that first date in a car, and she's watching me in the mirror how I would treat that girl in the back seat. And it really wasn't too fun to be with her because I could see mom's eyes all the time. But I'm trying to get to is the old school was, you know, I didn't know how to kiss the girl. And that can be difficult if you're a senior in high school and never kissed a girl yet. But thank God I'd siphoned gas out of tractors when I was younger and cars. And so I had about a 2-minute kiss when I got her at the doorstep. She said, "Where'd you learn to kiss like that?" And I said, "Siphoning gas out of tractor." But you use any technique you got to, you know, to get along in life. So I adopted real quick with the black people. And before I went to Ohio State, I'd never been in an airplane, never saw an airplane. So, you know, it is a different thing. Going to Ohio State, I couldn't wait to get out of it and leave because I didn't want an education, Sam. I went back 50 years later and I got my degree. That was 4 years ago. So I realized, you know, you can make it without the educational part, but it is very difficult. You've got to be a fighter. You've got to have everybody in the world, and you learn those principles through the teamwork that you get in sports. And I'm going to leave you with, it was great to be Sandusky. Not many girls play football, but they broke the barrier this year. A girl was on our team, and she scored some points. and that made history in 105 years. So it's really exciting to be with you today. Thank the NFL for putting on the program, and of course the Cleveland Browns. You know, they've always been my favorite. Love you.
Well, good morning. I'm Reggie Rucker, and I was born in Washington, D.C., and went to Boston University. And my first real encounter with someone of different color was when I got to college, and my roommate was the quarterback, and he was white. And, you know, I'm going to keep it real with you all because, you know, many of you in here know me and know the work that we do. JFK and John Adams, you guys have seen me in assemblies before. And I'm telling you that on this issue of race, you at some point in your life are going to need someone that doesn't quite look like you. And what I'm saying to you is you need to have an open mind and an open heart, because this going forward, unlike the America that many of us grew up in, this is going to be a country that in 50 years may be mostly Hispanic. It's true. And so I caution you to keep your minds open. Get something out of this today. You are confronted with issues that are totally different than those that we've confronted. We're trying to keep you safe every day. We're trying to keep you from being led down wayward paths by gangs. We're trying to keep you safe from the peer pressure that you encounter on a daily basis. I know what it's like for you having to go to school in danger, having to come home in danger, and having to have to go back to your neighborhoods and deal with the pressures that come from that. Okay, so you have a totally different set of circumstances that you deal with than we do. But nonetheless, you know, we are trying to tell you that there's opportunity for you as a result of the things that we've survived and experienced. And there's no way that I can even tell you about that without mentioning April 4th, 1968. How many of you know what happened on April 4th, 1968? Okay, that's the day Martin Luther King was assassinated. And that's the day when America turned inside out. Why? Because a man who was black was trying to tell the world that we are equal. Every man is equal. Your race does not make you inferior. And he did it in a nonviolent fashion, and for that he died. And I remember going out that night on the streets of Boston because I was in college, and I was trying to keep black people from getting shot because the police were white and they were afraid. The towns were burning all over America, and policemen were afraid. And I remember walking up to a police officer, and he took out his revolver and stuck it right in my face. And I said, "Officer, I'm trying to help." But that man feared me simply because I'm black. We've come a little bit further than that today. And, you know, hopefully we want to, because of this panel discussion today and the interaction with you, maybe entertain some of your thoughts and your fears and your concerns, and based upon our experiences, we can give you some answers, okay? So look forward to talking with you further.
Thank you, Reggie. And right ahead. Before we hear from our next panelist, I want to give you another opportunity to welcome another guest who's with us today. Another round of applause. I failed to mention her before. I mentioned Mrs. Beach. But we also have Mrs. Wooten. Mrs. John Wooten is here, Rita Wooten, who is not only the spouse of John Wooten, but she's a former Cleveland school teacher and principal. Let's give her a round of applause. And now, John Wooten.
really saved my life there. You know, if you hadn't introduced her, then I got to deal with this all day long. You know, what happened is that I'm not introduced. But anyway, she is as a matter of fact, we met many years ago, back in the old days when players had to have off-season jobs. I was a substitute teacher at her school. So that's how all of this started. And this was...
Hello?
That's it. But, you know, just listening to all our guys and so forth, talk about what has transpired in their lives. I'm a Texan by birth, grew up in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Very low economic family. We're the youngest of 6 children, single parent mother. And all that we know about it, all the things that we've seen deals with the fact that, fortunately for me, and I was telling our group here this morning, in the Brownsburg Board of Education, which integrated the schools across this country. I'm sure many of you read about it now in your history books and so forth. How that impacted my life was the fact that Carlsbad, New Mexico, Carlsbad High School, the schools had always been segregated, and I'm now going into my sophomore year in a Carver school there from 1st through 12th grade there in Carlsbad, and the impact of our superintendent, Tom Hansen, our principal at Carlsbad High School,
Guy Wade, and our head football coach, Ralph Boyer. For whatever reason, they went to the students there at Carlsbad High School and asked them what would be their vote as to allowing Negroes to come to school there at their high school. And that vote was approved by those students, and consequently that put me into a situation where I now in my sophomore year would have the opportunity to go to Carlsbad High School and participate in football. I'd never played organized football before. Simply didn't have the opportunities, the muni leagues and all that didn't exist in our place. So what we're saying to you is that racial equality is something that can impact all our lives. That allowed me the opportunity to go to a University of Colorado, and then, of course, to play football there and to come here as a drafted player with the Cleveland Browns in 1959. And that's when Shafrath and I got to be very good friends. He's absolutely right. I guess siphoning that gas taught him how to kiss girls, because we were at the college all-star game, and they lined up door to door to door. So apparently he was doing something right. But we've been great friends all the way since then. We're still great friends today, enjoy each other and just being around them and so forth. But the whole thing that we hope we're getting across to you is the fact, and Dr. King says it best, judge a man, a person, by the content of their character and who they are and how they go about doing their business. Judge them that way, black or white. Don't let the race card get involved to where you are judging people on the color of their skin. It doesn't matter whether they, quote, look like you or not. Doesn't matter at all. Doesn't matter the gender. You know, you look around here, young ladies, you see a lot of the young ladies in their orange sweaters who are working, quote, for the Cleveland Browns. Working for the Cleveland Browns. You don't necessarily have to be a football player to work for the Cleveland Browns. There's programs in marketing and accounting and lawyers and doctors, and all of those things can bring you into pro football, as we've done. We've had a very, very fortunate career in pro football. Now we're working primarily to again level the playing field. The first part of the lines, the Rooney Rule that you hear about,
we've been able to, quote, increase the number of African American and minority coaches in the NFL and the general managers. So all of this working together, we're proud to be Cleveland Browns, all of us, and we just hope that Mike and Schumer and all those guys get together out there and bring us a winning team back to Cleveland. So we thank you, and hopefully we're going to have a great day here this morning.
Well, we certainly want to thank all of our panelists for their opening remarks, and what I think we heard in those opening remarks in part is that in the time, or at the time when they were your age, racism and racial equality in America was obviously a lot different than it is today. And part of the reason why it is so improved versus what it was when they were your age is because they did things to make it better. Every single person up here is legendary for what they did on their football teams to bring about racial equality and what they have done in their life after football to bring about racial equality. And what their message is to you is you're the beneficiaries of it. We should take advantage of that. You should keep it going, and you should pick up the torch. You should make sure that in your lives you do what they did. You help to advance racial equality, which means working together, doing things as a team, respecting one another irrespective of race and background, not letting race be a factor in your decision about how to interact with other people. That's what that is. But they're also adding something else that Reggie Rucker said. If the ultimate objective of this program is to try to enhance the likelihood of your success in life, then there are some other things that you need to do over and above working on racial equality. And they all mentioned it. You need to work on education. You need to make sure that you are well prepared for your future. You need to work on setting goals. You need to work on doing positive things and not negative things that could take you away from your goals. So they've said a lot already, and they have more to say, but we want to make sure that they are talking to the subject that you want to hear about, so I'd like to offer you the opportunity to ask a question. And keep in mind that you're asking a question of people who have, as I said, done some really spectacular things in their lives and when they were your age or just a little bit younger and older. So with that, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we will get a mic to you so that everyone can hear your question. I'm sure there's some sort of big prize, probably season tickets to whoever raises the first question. Isn't that right, Mark? Their hand went up. Do we have a question? Yes, sir. I'm going to try to repeat your question so the people on the teleconference can hear it. The question, I believe, was directed to Mr. Wooten, and it asked the question, during the years when you were playing, did black and white players have separate locker rooms? Did they bunk together when they traveled? Did they eat together when they had meals and so forth? How was that situation when you were playing?
Okay. You're referring, of course, to Cleveland Browns or high school? Where are you? Cleveland Browns. No, when we came here in 1959 with the Cleveland Browns, we, quote, did not room together on the road, but our locker room was the same, and when we traveled, and this again is one of the reasons why I take such great pride with the Cleveland Browns, because when we traveled in the South to Texas and Florida and those places where, quote, segregated facilities and so forth, we never separated our team. Other teams in the National Football League, when they traveled into cities where the segregation were, particularly Dallas and Florida and those teams there, their black players stayed with black families. That did not happen with the Cleveland Browns. In Dallas, Texas, there was only one place that all of us could stay, and that was the Ramada Inn out by Love Field, which is still in existence. Love Field we're talking about is the airport there, airport field there. But other teams, their black players did not stay with the team. Now, and I was telling Reggie today, what we did was, to offset this, we, through the Players Association, made a proposal to eliminate blacks rooming with blacks, that rookies had to be roomed alphabetically. And that's when the integration of the rooms on the road became, and of course, if you were a veteran player, you had to you could choose whatever roommate you wanted. But rookies had to be roomed alphabetically. Does that answer your question?
I'd like to add something to that. When I came into the league in 1969, I came into the league with the Dallas Cowboys, and I was a rookie free agent. And my roommate was Roger Staubach. And I knew he was a Heisman Trophy winner, great player. He had gone into the military and was 5 years late getting into the NFL. But here's another case where that rooming with Roger Staubach created a relationship with another white player that lasts for a lifetime. And today, Roger Staubach and I are dear friends. And this was the beginning of, I think, around that time, really breaking down those walls, those barriers that existed.
Well, I'd like to say something too, because I took a different journey. My journey, I originally played professional football in the American Football League, and I played with the New England Patriots. And in New England, we were to go to Houston, play the Houston Oilers in New Orleans, and there was a separate living arrangements. Like John said, we had to stay in a segregated quarters, and we had to extend to the colored neighborhood, and then the white ball players stayed at the hotels. But I refused to go, and I called a team meeting, and we had a team meeting, and of course they decided that, but with the Patriots, that they would still go and play the game, although we would have to live in segregated quarters. So they put me on, gave me $16 per diem and a plane ticket home. That's the experience I had with the segregated. Then when I came to Cleveland, in traveling, we did not room together. Blacks and whites didn't room together. And because I want to keep this the way it was, there were quotas when I played professional football. With Cleveland, there was a quota, although there were some positive things going on with the administration. But we still stayed in, our rooms were not integrated. I'm not familiar with when the rooms were integrated here at Cleveland, because at 69, that's when was my final season. So after that, there was definitely some positive things done. But there were some things that I think that a lot of you young people may not even know about or be familiar with. There was a concept of stacking, and I don't know if any of you know what stacking is. Nobody knows what stacking. Does anybody up here know what stacking is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we know what stacking is that if you're competing for a particular position, this is no exaggeration, but and I don't want to use any particular, I don't want to exaggerate, use no hyperbole about this, but as a defensive cornerback with the Browns, there would be 10 defensive backs behind me competing for my job. On the other corner, there might not be but one person competing for the job. So they would stack everybody behind certain players. And the reason I wanted Maybe, okay, all right. The reason I want to address this is that it's so important to understand the dynamics of how things change. Not only was there a situation of stacking, there were certain positions that were not available in the National Football League for black athletes. There were certain positions, so there's been quite a transition that we should all feel proud of. But what I want to make certain is that, and I think Reggie mentioned it earlier when we were upstairs talking, there are some fundamental psychological problems that you have with the whole institution of racism. And that institution requires a certain level of preparedness to address it. So I don't want to leave any notions that everything is that easy. You must struggle, and you must make yourself available and prepare yourself. The final point I want to make on this is because one of the experiences I had when I was drafted by the New York Giants, and I want to say this briefly, is that everything that happened with the New York Giants, I assigned to racism. So the reason I wasn't playing was because of racism. The reason that was my assessment of it. But there was an experience I had that Allie Sherman was the coach, and he asked me a question. And he asked me, he said, who are we playing? I said, we're playing the Detroit Lions. He said, who's the cornerback? I said, Dick Night Train Lane. He said, how big is he? I said, I don't know. How tall is he? I said, I don't know. How much he weigh? I said, I don't know. He said, if you're going to run an 86 quick end, what does he do? I said, I don't know. He said, if you're going to run a fly, what does he do? I said, I don't know. He called Frank Gifford. He said, Gifford. He said, who are we playing? Frank gave him all the answers. He said, how much he weigh? He weighed 215. How tall is he? He's 6'3". If you're going to run a quick out, what does he do? He takes one step back and then he backs up. If you're going to run a fly, what does he do? He turn and run. See, I was saying I wasn't playing with the Giants, and I was blaming it on racism. But I wasn't playing with the Giants because I didn't know. I hadn't prepared myself. So preparation is equally important in this particular struggle or journey that you young people are going to have to go into.
Thank you very much. Those are great answers. Now, I have a question here that I'm going to direct initially to Reggie and then to anyone else who wants to raise it. And as you are thinking about your next question, let me just again emphasize something that I think has been said, or a message that you should take away. You've heard the panelists give you some examples of the type of society that existed when they were your age and when they were trying to achieve their goals in life. And they've given you some examples of how they overcame those great challenges. Challenges like, if you were an African-American player on a team, you couldn't room with the other players. That doesn't happen anymore today. If you were an African-American on the team, you couldn't play certain positions, quarterback, wide receiver. That doesn't happen today. Those things have been improved because of what they've done. And the same thing is true outside of football. In their years, my years, when we were your age, it would be difficult to get a position in a company or to get a good job or to be admitted to the school you wanted to go to. All of those things have been improved. And so one message is, if they could do it, if they could confront those kinds of challenges and conquer them, so can you. Now, you have different challenges to conquer. You don't have the same ones that they mentioned, but you have the challenge of staying away from drugs. You have the challenge of not dropping out of school. You have a challenge of, being your best, measure up to your potential in school. You have the challenge of avoiding teen pregnancy. There's a lot of different challenges that you all have to address, but I think the message you should take away is, if they were able to overcome the challenges that confronted them when they were your age, you ought to be inspired that you can do the same thing. And that leads me into this question. This question is from Roxborough Road Middle School in Syracuse, New York, and it's emphasized on here that this question is coming from the Jim Brown College School. And they'd like to know, Reggie, when you were on a team that was losing a game, or in your post-football career, if you were experiencing something where you were not being successful, how did you rally yourself? How did you inspire yourself, or what inspired you to pick yourself up and to accomplish your goals when things weren't going well for you?
Well, first of all, hello out there, Jim Brown School. I spoke with him last night, told him we were doing this show, so it's nice to have you joining us today. To answer that question, Steve, one of the things that I did, I would always put myself in a moment. It's called the visualization. How many of you are aware of visualization? And that's actually putting yourself in the moment to be successful. And I just feel that using that technique and seeing success, seeing productivity, seeing an elevated situation that concludes successfully is a way in which I dealt with that. The other thing about that is understanding that having come from adversity and overcoming adversity and achieving and continuing and having people say you can't do this or you can't do that. Many of you know you're being said, those things are being said to you. And let me tell you right now, okay, because this is an audience that is predominantly minority. Let me tell you something right now. Don't you ever allow anyone to tell you what you can't do and what you can't become. Don't let them tear you down. Never, never. You walk away from that person and you say, I am somebody. I can achieve. I will achieve. Because no one has the right to tear you down. And in this country, in the United States of America, where in 2008 we elected a president whose father was Kenyan and whose mother was white, that tells you all about this country, America.
Great. I'm going to ask Mr. Shafrath if you'd like to comment on that too. How do you keep yourself positive when you're confronting lots of difficult challenges?
Thank you. That's a good question. And I, like Reggie, want to thank American Schools being part of this and watching the program. I think I alluded a little bit to it. I grew up on a farm, and it was a poor farm. I grew up in the Depression of the 30s and 40s. And so I have a different perspective maybe for every one of you. I think the key is your relationships with, if it isn't your parents, you got to have a good mentor, you got to have a good friend that really keeps you on the track. And if you get off of it, she's got to tell you, or he's got to tell you. Nobody is born perfect. And there's no way I could read something and say, I'm going to be successful. It's a bunch of little steps that you're going to take in your life. And I hear it so often in the schools that you've got to study to be an engineer. You got to do, you know, I'm 75 years old and I wanted to be a teacher. I still haven't taught a day in class. All I know is that there's different opportunities that open the door. But if you have a good reputation and good background, if it isn't a parent, somebody that's really going to guide you, and they say, boy, I'll hire John. Why? Because he's father, or he's a good worker. I don't care if he did janitor work. He works at it and he loves it. So love being a servant. Don't ask people to give you everything. Say, I want the opportunity to do something, and go do it. I think the greatest thing that we can get out here, the message to you is, unless you really work for something, you'll never appreciate it. I don't care how much people give you, how much money you can make. Going to college, we hear today, a lot of athletes want money. Professional athletes, it's all about who makes the most money. I'm going to tell you, there's another thing in life, and that's the people around you that helped you to get there. Do you respect them? Do they respect you? Do they know your attitude and your values and the discipline you do so that you can teach others. When the kids watch you, when you're successful, can you give them the same message? Nothing was handed to me. I didn't ask for anything. I wanted to be a servant. I wanted to earn my own way in life. And I know you got a chance. Everybody in this room has a chance. But do it on your own. Enjoy what you're doing. Don't think you got to be a pilot, an engineer. It's nice to have those dreams, but take the opportunity one day at a time. What's in front of you today? And pursue it the best way you know how. And have God in the front of your plan. That helps a lot.
Thank you. All right, we'd like to have another question. There's a question. Stand right up and ask it. I'm going to repeat the question. Tell me if I get it right. And he's directing it to the panel. At any point in your football career, did you let racism restrict what you did? Sam, you want to start that one off?
The answer is unequivocally no. But let me share another story, and this is really a congratulations for the Cleveland Browns. I grew up here in Cleveland watching the Browns develop here. 1946, they brought Bill Willis and Mary Motley here to Cleveland, the first two blacks that played for the Browns during that era. And I also ended up working for Bill Willis when he's at the recreation department here at the city of Cleveland. It was a great experience, and the Browns had great courage in bringing them along. And then lastly, when they won the championship, which Walt Beach and Mr. Wooten and Shafrath were part of, the Browns had more blacks on the team than any other team in the NFL. That is a major statement about this organization, their commitment to equality.
Sam, I want to add something, because at that point, Sam said that they had more blacks playing on that team in 1964. I was in school in D.C., and I remember watching the Cleveland Browns play the Baltimore Colts, and I was just fascinated by them because for the first time, I saw players on the field that looked like me, because the Washington Redskins did not have black players for a long, long time. The owner of that team said no Negro player will ever play for the Washington Redskins. And then the Cleveland Browns traded Bobby Mitchell there. But that's something that's very important. Actually seeing someone who looks like you, from your race, from your culture, having success and having done something significant really motivated me. And I know it probably will motivate you.
The 64 team, first of all, I want to answer the gentleman's question. Is that I personally didn't have the level of courage that Sam had. A lot of times racism has scared me, man. And it has almost made me want to quit. But my father, who was the love of my life at that particular time, he was the one that constantly encouraged me. See, it's not going to defeat you. And I had that success. Let me say something about the 64 team, because John is over there, and Dick, is that in 1964, our championship team, and I want to be clear about that, because we had 12 black ball players on the team. And one of the things is, so you do the arithmetic, there's 40 guys on the team, 12 of them were black, so if you want to, my arithmetic's not that good. But at the same time, the number of white players on the team, there's two things that I've always assigned the success for that particular team is that there was never an issue or a request by the majority of white ball players that we should not be black individuals. So we were never moved into a situation where we had to demean or think less of ourselves. And therefore, we never had to be in a position to ask anything like Dick is saying from anyone else. So we didn't ask any quarters. We didn't give any quarters. We were respected for who we were as 12 individuals, and the 12 individuals respected the rest of it. And that comes out of a situation of the question that you posed of self-esteem. Is how strongly do you feel about who you are? And what Reggie is saying is that who do you want to be other than who you are? That's a profound question. So I've never wanted to be anybody other than who I am. And you cannot allow racism, sexism, elitism, or classism to run you to someplace other than who you are. So you got to be true to yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there another question? I think I saw a hand. The young lady in the green in the back, would you stand up and ask your question, ma'am? All right, say that again. I'll repeat the question. Was it hard maintaining your grades while dealing with racial prejudice? Who would like to start? Walter?
I went to Central Michigan University, and I just want to share. At Central Michigan University, if your class met on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and you played football on Saturdays, so Friday I would not be in class because we were going to be traveling to Illinois, Wisconsin, or someplace like that. So on Wednesday, we had to have our homework in for Friday. So you had to do the book. You had to study. But you go to college for an education. That's why you go to college. You go to college for an education. You don't go to college to play football. You go to college for an education, and football is what you do. And up here, I'm not speaking for everybody up here, but football is what I did. That's not who I am.
You also have to make sure, as you are looking at schools and colleges in which you want to attend, you have to make sure and certain that that culture is right for you. And so, as Steve has been saying, this is a different time than when we went to school. When we went to school, all of us up here probably went on football scholarships. And one of the things that I guarantee you about all of us up here, we all graduated with degrees or advanced degrees. So we kept our education in mind. The NFL happened. And for those of you young men out here, a lot of football players, you get a lot of football players coming from Cleveland. And I'm not telling you that you can't play football. I think that's the worst thing anybody can tell you. If you go ahead for your dream. You try to reach your dream. Dr. King told us that there's a dream. He had a dream, and it inspired me, and I had a dream. So whatever your dream is, you hold on to it.
All right. John, would you want to comment on that as well?
My only comment on it was the fact that we were fortunate that going to the University of Colorado, and this doesn't exist today, that you were on, quote, a scholarship. Your grades and so forth is what allowed you to be there at this school. Consequently, if your grades were suffering, you could drop football and maintain your scholarship for the 4 years you were there. That's not true today. And again, all of these things is what you have to adapt to. Nowadays, if you, quote, are there on a football scholarship and all of a sudden you're not good enough to make the team, they can take your scholarship away from you. So when you and your parents are sitting and talking about scholarship in schools, make sure you know exactly what you have to deal with. Again, set your goals, your dreams, know the path that you need to take to get there, and just stay the course. Be strong, be focused in where you want to go in life. If you take that position, you will find that there are many people that some you never know, and some you know that'll reach out to help you to get there. Set your goals, stay on track, stay focused, and you can achieve.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Stand right up and ask your question. question is, what or who influenced you the most in your life to keep pushing and keep pursuing your dreams? All of you can
For me,
respond.
it was my mother. I never knew my father, so my mother worked hard and struggled, and I wanted to get into a position one day where I could take care of her.
Mr. Shafrath?
It was my father and mother. On the farm, Dad challenged me to be better at everything I did. So if you were milking cows, he'd race me. If we were baling hay, he'd race me. How fast we get a bale on the... All I'm saying is he never saw me play football because he was a farmer. In my life, I played 20 years, high school, college at Ohio State and the Browns. Dad never saw me play, but I give him all the credit of the attitude and determination I had in life. It's the way he treated me. John Wooten helped me a lot. John, not on my dating, but he and I played. He was a guard and I was a tackle. And of course, I'd forget the counts sometimes, and I'd say, "Woots, what's the count?" He'd tell me. So I really appreciated all that, Woots. Good question.
Mr. Tidmore?
Well, my parents, I think, were my primary motivators, but I did meet two great white men who really inspired me. I mentioned earlier John Spencer Farrell, my high school coach, and Woody Hayes at Ohio State. They really brought out the best in me. And without those two individuals, I really would have truly never realized what I could do in life. Woody Hayes was a very, very driving force, and Dick Shafrath can tell you about that one. But any challenge I had at Ohio State, I could always go to him. I remember Sociology 401. They had books that said Negroes were slow-foot, thick-tongued, and whatever. I took it to Woody. I said, "What is this?" He made them take it out of the whole system. So I would say those people really influenced me and helped me through life.
Dr. Beach?
My parents, my mother and my father, especially my father, he was very instrumental. He had a saying. He said, he used to say, "Boy," he said, "if you're on the top, be the top of the top." He said, "if you're on the bottom, be the top of the bottom." And that's what I live by.
Great. Mr. Wooten?
My mom, I mentioned earlier that I came from a family of six. I'm the youngest of six, single parent, very low economic. Those of you that may have seen the movie Help, that's my life. A coach, I made mention of the fact that in 1952, going to Carlsbad High School, Ralph Boyer, just an outstanding person. Those of you that may have been old enough to have seen Coach Tom Landry there at the Dallas Cowboys, those two men are so much alike that when I worked for the Cowboys there, went to work for the Cowboys in 1975, I told Coach Boyer, "I got to bring you over here to meet Coach Landry. You're too much alike for you not to have to know each other." And Coach Ralph Boyer, I clearly remember, I'm in the 11th grade, and I've decided that I'm going to go to the Navy. I'm going to quit school, drop out of school, and go to the Navy. And he sat with me and talked, showed me how I would have the chance to go and excuse me. Excuse me, please. But he showed me how I could have the opportunity that if I went on to college, that I could achieve things for me, my family, by doing it just that way. He wasn't talking about playing pro football. He He was just talking about going on and getting an education. So those are the people that mean so much to me.
Well, I think it's interesting as we listen to these panelists talk to answer the young man's question about who was the most significant influence in their life, and obviously some it was parents, but it's interesting to note that for some African Americans, it was a white person. For a white person on the stage, we mentioned Wooten, it was a black person. And that's what this discussion is about. This discussion is to remind us all of how much progress and how much improvement has been made in racial equality in our country. It's not perfect yet, but it's much improved. And you're having the opportunity to see some of the people who made it happen. And I think it's wonderful that they all have traveled such distances to be with you today, to share their story, and to hopefully provide you with a little information that will improve the success in your life. Whether you're a minority, a non-minority, whatever the case may be, young man, young lady, I think we've gotten a tremendous lesson, not only a lesson in history, but a lesson in life. And we should give our panelists, well, before we give our panelists this huge round of applause, I will ask if there's one last question that somebody is dying to have the answer to. Young man in the uniform, please. What was your worst experience during the time that you were in the NFL? John, did you have any bad experience? Mr. Wooten?
Probably losing a game that you thought we should have won. I would probably go back to 1963 when I thought we had a better team than we won with in '64. That was probably, not winning the championship in 1963 when that was a year, if you go back and check the record, Jim Brown sets the rushing record with, 1,837 yards. Very easily could have been 2,000 yards, but we simply didn't play as a team. And yet we realized that. And therefore, in 1964, we beat the Baltimore Colts, who had a much better team than we had. When you look at the Baltimore Colts in 1964, they had like 9 Hall of Famers on that team. Johnny U, Ray Berry, Mackey, all those guys are Hall of Famers. Yet we beat them right here at this here at this stadium, 27-0, simply because of us pulling together. But if you go back to '63 and look at that record, you'll see that should have been the winning team, and that was probably one of the most disappointing times in my life as a football player.
Mr. Rucker, would you comment on one of your worst experiences, either in football or out, and how you recovered from it?
In football, it would definitely be January of 1981, playoff game against the Oakland Raiders. Many of you may know it's called Red Right 88. How many of you, have you ever heard of that? Yeah. And we were playing at about minus 40 degrees below zero right here on this lake here. And we lost to the eventual Super Bowl champion Oakland Raiders. Probably the most heartbreaking loss in my career.
Mr. Shafrath, would you recall one of your worst moments?
Really, my worst moment probably was 2 games that I didn't get to play at all. One was George Preston Marshall, the owner of the Washington Redskins, where John alluded to. Bobby Mitchell broke the racial barrier. I was in the military playing soldier, fighting in Vietnam, and not fighting, but I was on that ready to go to Vietnam. And I was allowed to play in every game on Sundays. The commissioner the football said each team, though, had to vote whether I could play. So I was in Mansfield at our guard unit, which was ready to go to Berlin crisis at that time. And George Preston Marshall said, we don't want Shafrath playing. And so it was the biggest discouragement in my life. And except when I went to Vietnam, I had a soldier die in my arms fighting for this country. And so those two things really stick out in my mind as big, vivid experiences. And I just learned one thing. If you don't have Christ in your life, there's a lot of these circumstances, you'll never get up and out of the problems you have today. And they've got me through those. Thank God.
Thank you. Mr. Tidmore, your worst experience and how you recovered.
I think my worst experience was my injury here at the Cleveland Browns, and then I was traded to Pittsburgh, and I had to have another operation, and I realized my career in football was over, and I had great, great plans of what I was going to do with football and the money and the things I had in mind. Then I got an opportunity to become an investment banker, and I literally made 3 times as much money as I made in football. I began to understand that life was more than football. Football was a sport. It's for a limited time in life. But I think that was probably my worst and my best opportunity, because I made serious money after I left football.
Okay. Dr. Beach, would you conclude it?
I'm just going to make my last point, because we kept talking about Dr. King, and everybody know about Dr. King's statement. But I have a quote here by Dr. King, and this is for all of the young men and all of the young women here. And this is Dr. King's quote. He said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." And I think that all of the young people, and especially if you're participating in sports, there's going to be challenge and controversy. And that's because I don't have it. All of my experience in football was both good and bad, so I can't focus in on one.
Well, again, I wish we had more time for more discussion. You guys have been great in your attendance. I'm sure it was useful for you to hear these people. I think they did a tremendous job in presenting some life lessons to all of us. Let's give them a rousing round of applause.